Hello everyone, my name is Lucas Johnston, and I am very nervous right now. This is my first time speaking to a room full of strangers, except for my team just down here who is all supporting me. Thank you, Plug-in Digital friends. And honestly, if I were to offer advice to anybody who's thinking about doing public speaking after this, don't start on the main stage at Camp France. It's a little bit hard. So I will be delivering my presentation in English. However, if you have any questions at the end and you want to ask in English or French, please do. Anyway. Like I said, my name is Lucas Johnston. I am the lead producer at Dear Villagers, the publishing arm of Plug-in Digital. Today I want to chat with y'all about some things I've been thinking about around the relationship between studios and publishers and all of our partners. We will start off a bit conceptual and philosophical, but then I'll move into the main topic around transparency and what kinds of things I would like to see more often, both from the studio to the publisher and from the publisher to the studio. Finally, like with all the other presentations you've seen, we'll have some time at the end for you to ask questions. Sound good? First, I want to share a little of my background with you. I was born in the United States, in Texas specifically, and I spent the first 30 years of my life there. Answering a few questions quickly, no, I don't own horses. Yes, I have shotguns, and there aren't that many cactuses in Austin where I grew up. All the cactuses you find more in West Texas than in Central Texas. I wanted to be a doctor until I was about 15 or 16 years old. When I debugged and fixed a game on my graphing calculator. I don't know if any of you had those in school or if you had games on them, but it turned out that fixing programs was easier than fixing people. And I decided to be a computer scientist. So I went to the University of Texas, got my degree, and spent about 10 years in various jobs doing software engineering or project management until I joined Blizzard Entertainment in 2009. I started at their Austin office. I moved to their headquarters in California. Then I moved to the European headquarters in France, in Versailles specifically. And after about 10 years of moving around Blizzard and doing a variety of things, I left to join a CDPR in Poland to take a chance there. But within the year, I moved back to France, this time in the south, around Montpellier. And that's where I got married and found a job working with Plug-in Digital. They found me, but still. I started there on the 15th of June, 2020, the very first day that our first lockdown ended, and I've been with the company ever since. The other dots that you see here on the screen are all places that I've visited. I tried to mark every place that I've been, but I'm an old man now, so I may have forgotten some stuff. Now, I gave you that long introduction so that I could talk about the first concept that I have here, and that's that when strangers meet for the first time, they don't share a common language. They don't know each other. They can't share a common language until they have shared some of their background, shared some of what they know, what they feel, what they've experienced, and brought their perspective more in line with the perspective of whoever they're talking to. All of the experiences that we live, everything that we do, influences the way that we think and the way that we talk. Even when people speak the same mother tongue, it takes time, it takes effort to establish a shared vocabulary, a shared lexicon. This is especially true in our industry, in games, where we're creating new ideas, new mechanics, new worlds that have never existed before in some cases. I bet if we left right now and walked out to the square just out here and like left the convention center, let's say 200 meters away, and asked some people if they wanted to play a third-person 3D Metroidvania, maybe one of them would have an idea what you're talking about, but largely they wouldn't know. So the first assertion that I want to make is that studios and publishers are like strangers. They need to work together to establish mutual understanding as soon as possible in the contact with one another. And for me, I think that process starts with the pitch from the studio and the offer from the publisher. Now, keeping in mind, we're going to shelve the pitch and offer for a moment. We'll come back to it. We'll come to the next assertion I want to make, that at each step in making a game, there's someone waiting on something. When I talk about this with my team, I usually say upstream and downstream, meaning upstream are the people making things, or people or processes who are doing stuff and making things, and downstream are the people and processes who are waiting for that thing. Some of you may know the acronym COPUS, especially my team. It stands for, it's a way of documenting relationships between different people and processes and within a system. It's C for customer, the person receiving the thing, O for output. In the middle is the process, which is the thing doing the work. Then you have a set of inputs, and finally the suppliers of those inputs. You often can see this written the other way, SIPOC, but I prefer to put the customer at the front of the acronym to really focus on who's waiting for stuff. So now, coming back to the pitch and the offer, if we look at it with COPUS, the process we can say is reviewing the pitch. The input of that is the pitch itself, and the output is hopefully an offer. So the studio is, of course, both the customer and the supplier, so it's a bit of a closed loop, but they provide the pitch, and hopefully it comes back around with an offer. That is an example of dependency, but a closed loop dependency, but one nonetheless. So the last conceptual bit here, some folks talk about the games industry as a community. So if we combine the two ideas that I just put, the two assertions that I just put forward, that strangers by default speak different languages, and that everyone is waiting on someone else to do something, we can create a new tool, a new thought tool, that we can use to inspect this common conceptual model of a community. So when we look at that sort of that model, if we look at this model in the idea of interdependent strangers, do things still ring true? Does it still feel right? So if we start with the studio in the beautiful purple house on the left, on the upper left, we start with their idea, their game, their pitch. It continues down through to the offer from the publisher village there. Ultimately, in the middle, there's two strangers meeting and discussing something new. As you go further and further along in the process of making a game, you have more people and more partners who get involved. And each new partner represents another stranger, represents another language and another specialty that they're bringing. And more dependencies, where there will be more people waiting on more stuff. So as you go along here, you're seeing more complexity, more connections, and more different viewpoints on the same thing. The thing is, after a few years in the industry, you do tend to optimize this process. It's not new people every time. You tend to work with the same partners. You establish common relationships that you repeat processes and procedures with. They know how you work, you know how they work. And so over time, these partners that you make, they evolve from strangers into people that you know. You establish a common language. I do note that as a producer, I often find myself acting as a translator. I feel like I am translating between different viewpoints amongst all the different partners and people that I work with. So overall, this idea of interdependent strangers seems solid to me. I think it sounds okay. And it brings me to my third sort of assertion out of combining the two, that is, making a game requires these interdependent strangers to all be part of the same conversation. Okay. So what does that mean for the studio and their pitch? We'll start there. The pitch is what starts the conversation between the studio and any other partner they want to make, including a publisher. Typically, a pitch includes certain core elements. You'll see an introduction to the entire team, basically like how long the studio's existed, where it's located, any projects that they've worked on before. You'll see individual members of the team being introduced, their roles in the team, the professional background that they have. Sometimes you'll see their personal interests. A lot of the time in the pitch, the body of the pitch is around the story, the environment, characters, objectives, equipment, enemies. The sheep here is the enemy. The items that they have, just really anything that's going to communicate the language of this specific game to other people. And finally, you'll often find the estimated timeline, usually in big chunks. Usually you'll see people talking about it's going to take this long for us to leave alpha, this long for us to leave beta. We think we'll be gold by this date. It's clear to me that everything you see in a pitch is intended to establish a foundational understanding with strangers. It's the same kind of thing that I did at the beginning to introduce myself. I told you where I come from, where I've been, what I'm interested in, and even described a bit the objectives of what we're doing here today, even though all of you already knew that. Having all that stuff in the pitch, it's fundamental, it's necessary, it's the tool that you'll use to communicate about your game for, potentially 3 to 5 years. So getting this bit right, crucial. If that's the baseline for the pitch, though, I want to talk now about other stuff that can be shared, stuff that I'm interested in as a producer. First, I'd love to know how your team members interact, who works together the most often, or even more broadly, what does collaboration look like on your team? What does collaboration look like in your studio? How does your team discuss new ideas? Is it all in chat? Do you have phone calls? Do you do screen shares? Is there a big whiteboard somewhere that everybody draws on? Do you have a desk in your office that's just covered in sticky notes, or maybe like event storming or something, just going outside, far outside the box there on trying to figure out your game systems and how it all works? And which team members are making decisions? Who are the decision makers in your organization? Is it life raft decision making, where everybody in the studio needs to be in agreement before progress is made? Or is there a key person in the studio who's signing off on everything that's being added, on each thing that's being added or removed even? To me, the answers to these questions communicate intricate detail about how your team hangs together, which ultimately informs me as the stranger It informs me about what I can expect from your team as the project goes on. If there's an important decision to be made, do I need to wait for Sylvie? Or can I coordinate with the rest of the team to get the best answer? What happens if Bob here gets sick? Does everything stop? That's really good information for me to know up front. After you tell me about your teammates and how they organize themselves, I'd like to know the processes you use. How is work planned? Do you feed tasks into a Kanban pipeline? Do you have time boxing, sprints? Are you Scrum? Are you not? Do you prefer to work from a single GDD and waterfall from there? Is everybody just kind of up to their own devices to figure out how to get their job done and how to get their job finished? And what about new ideas? Can you tell me how your new ideas are tracked? Do you have a backlog somewhere? Do you keep a list in an Excel sheet? Do you just remember all your good ideas and forget all the bad ideas? Are there just comments in your code that say we should maybe do something about this? Another super useful thing to know is how often your team meets. Do you meet regularly to discuss to discuss things? If you do, what are those meetings? How often do they happen? Who runs them? To give more tangible examples, would you say that you have regular retrospectives? So if you said we're time boxing and you say we're doing regular retrospectives, let me know. That's valuable for me to know because I'll know where I can connect with you and your team and get information about the progress on your game. Finally, how is work approved? Is there someone that is constantly reviewing the quality of the squads of your studio's output? Is there some time set aside every couple of weeks so that everybody sits down and plays the game and talks about the stuff? That's, again, all the answers to these questions help me understand how ideas move through your team, how a seed planted grows into a final product within your game, how those thoughts that your team puts forward become the tangible, playable elements of your game. It's important to remember that the way that you and your team works is guaranteed to be different from how every other studio that I'm working with, how they work. And so I want to adapt to your style. The more I know about the way that information and work flows through your team, the easier it is for me to do that. And lastly, I'd like to know what you're using to manage all of that stuff. What tools are you using to manage the processes that you run? Are you using source control? Tell me up front what source control you're using. Do you use it as a part of the approval process that you have? Let me know. Are you using any task tracking or project management tools? If so, what is it? How often does your team look at it? Are you reviewing it daily? Are you reviewing it daily as a team, weekly as a team? Just how often does that happen? Are you using a bug database? Again, if so, which one? I hope you are. It's very important to start keeping track of bugs, not just in your game, but in everything. Anything that you find that's going wrong, to write it down somewhere so that you remember it for the future. And what are you guys using to communicate? Do you have like a Slack channel? Are you in Discord, a Discord server? Do you use Teams or Skype or Facebook groups or ICQ or whatever thing people are doing these days to talk? Are you lucky enough to all sit in the same room and use sound and gestures to communicate ideas? If you are, let me know. That changes the way that me and my team will interact with you. It helps me understand the spaces that your team is going to be in and where your team is operating. If I know that, then it makes it easier for me and my team to join you where you are, rather than making you come and be where I am. Okay, so continuing on, I don't think it would be fair just to tell you what I expect from studios. I want to talk a little bit about what I think studios should expect from publishers as well. So let me talk about what I can do, what I'm offering as the lead producer of Dear Villagers to improve transparency in the other direction. I think that after you've talked with a publisher, you should know who's going to be involved from their team, who's going to be involved from the publisher, when they're going to be involved. You should be able to ask if everyone comes in at the start, if there's some people that show up later, and if so, why? Why did they show up later? You should be able to ask how all of these folks contribute in supporting your studio and the making of your game. You should be able to ask how in like a really mechanical way, how these people will interact with your team. Are you going to have weekly voice calls, or is it going to be like you'll hear from them once a month via email? Is it going to be daily chats? That's something that you should be able to ask and establish early on. It's a part, in my opinion, it's a part of establishing that relationship and being upfront with who's going to be where and when. Finally, an important question is who will give your team feedback? And how will it be delivered, and what will it look like? When will it be delivered? I think you should also be able to ask how that feedback is generated. Is it something just internal amongst the members of the publisher? Do they use external resources like friends and family? Do they hire external companies to give them that feedback and funnel it into you? All of that, all of these questions, I think, serve to help you understand as the studio who you'll be working with and what you can expect from them. Another element that I don't see people ask a lot about, that I don't see people mention at the beginning, in my experience at least, is how progress will be measured and how that progress is rewarded. Maybe it's difficult to talk to strangers about money, but I think it's an important topic to have before you're signing a contract. At Dear Villagers, we call these milestones, I think that's a pretty common term in the industry, but other people do use different things, I'm aware. So these milestones help us break down the larger chunks of alpha, beta, release candidate, all the phases that make up the development of your game. It helps us break those down into more easily imaginable chunks. So I think some questions you can ask, you can ask up front are, what's the approach to milestones? Like that's a conversation that I think you can have early, immediately, during introductions. How do you do milestones? How do you do checkpoints? At Dear Villagers, I like to have milestones at the smallest interval 4 weeks and at the biggest interval 8 weeks. 6 weeks to me is usually a pretty good heartbeat for a 2 to 3 year project. Usually at the start when we're discussing their project, I work with the developers, the studio themselves, to define their milestones. I feel like it is more achievable if the people who have the best idea of the project are deciding the pieces of work that they can do and when. Most of the time, what I'm doing in those conversations is looking for, keeping, how to say that, is staying aware of any bad smells that could be coming with the project. Things like if they're going to hire a writer very late in they're going to do all the game dev and they're going to do the story at the end, but by hiring the writer at the end of the process, they're setting themselves up for failure on localization. It's going to take too long to do localization, and then they'll have all the languages in their game too late for launch. Things like that would be stuff that I'm watching for. I think you should also ask how milestones are validated and when they're paid. That's something that it should either be offered up front or you should be comfortable asking. It's important to remember, especially as a new studio or a small studio, if validation there's a big difference between validation taking 1 week and then payment being 2 weeks later, so 3 weeks in total from delivery to payment, versus something where it's a month for validation and a month for payment. That you got to keep in mind that you're going to deliver a thing and then 2 months later, you're actually getting the money for that work. That for the people who are starting studios and who are operating studios, that's an important part of budgeting is keeping in mind when milestone payments will come and the chance that you might not pass, you might not succeed at a milestone, you might submit your best effort and the publisher says this needs to be better. And that will impact the timeline further on the payment of that, for the payment of that work. And lastly, again, on a touchy subject, but you should ask up front how recovery is done, how recoup payments are made. When does that happen? How much is it? How long will it take? If you launch your game and it's wildly successful, what's the estimate for when you start earning money off of that game, when you start earning the royalties from the work that you did? And lastly, I think it's important to remember, going back to that idea of upstream and downstream dependencies, it's important to remember that outside of publisher studio, outside of that relationship, there are other partners who need stuff. There are other partners who need builds and text and videos and assets and just all sorts of things that go into the product around the game that you're making. And even ignoring the milestone deliverables, you should expect to generate other outputs across the lifetime of production of your game. You should expect to need to do more than just make a game through the course of making the game. So some things you should ask whenever you're contacting a publisher, ask how localization works. Are there languages and fonts that you need to support from the beginning? Does the publisher already have in mind certain markets that they know that they want to go to? And so just up front, they can tell you, you need simplified Chinese, and you need the simplified Chinese alphabet, the Japanese alphabet, the Korean alphabet, and Cyrillic, in addition to the standard Romance characters. I think you can ask, what's the best way to deliver that text? Is it best to have a CSV? Is Google Sheets the right way? Does the publisher have a specific tool that they want to use for managing text back and forth between the localization partners and the studio? All of that should be stuff that you know and will influence the work that you have to do on your game. If you're making a multi-platform game, if you know that you're not just going to be in one place, how will porting to the other platforms work? If you want to do it yourself, ask how you get dev kits, how you get test kits. How long does that take? Who manages them? When do they have to be returned at the end? Because all of that stuff is things that can be variable depending upon the relationship and the partnership with the publisher. If you're going to get somebody else to do that work, when do they show up? What do you need to share with them? What do they need to do their work? How often will you hear from them? If you're going to be sharing, if you're going to be working on something with and another team is going to be taking the thing that you've worked on for 2 years and doing extra, will they be giving you feedback? Will they be asking you questions? How does that communication cycle work with that stranger? Inside of the publishing group, but a little bit separated from development is marketing and communications. You should ask the publisher how marketing assets are produced. Does the publisher expect you to do that work? Is it going to be outsourced to yet another stranger, yet another partner that needs to get into the language and mindset of your game and your world? Is it something that's handled internally by the publisher? Really, it's a question around how many more partners, how many more strangers will be involved, how many more dependencies will be created outside of the publisher-studio relationship. And finally, I think it's important to ask what the publisher is doing to validate quality. If there's been a discussion already around milestones and validation of milestones between the publisher and the studio, what about between all the other partners? What sort of quality assurance or quality control is being done on the localization and the porting and the marketing assets and everything else? What is the publisher doing to guarantee that all of the things that are in the product surrounding your game are as good, if not better than, the game that you're making? So those are all the questions that I've thought of. Having gone pretty deep into all those questions that you should be able to ask and get good answers for, we come back to this core concept, the idea that we are a community all working together. I think that there is more information that we can offer, that we can share together, to be more transparent during the first contact between a studio and a publisher, or a studio and any other partner that exists. And I think that's important because making a game also means making exports for localization. It means daily builds for QA. It means making final builds for certification by platform owners, and final builds, and final 2 builds, and really truly final build 2. It means making press releases and social posts and all the things that go into the communications around your game. It means making deals for international distribution with new languages to support and new partners with new ways, with different ways of thinking about your game and the way it will work in their region. It means retail distribution deals. It means making retail agreements where you get a box on a shelf that you can then buy and hold in your hand. And that's a whole nother set of partners and assets and timelines and dependencies that need to be kept in mind. It means there's more to making a game than just making a game. It's a team of teams. It's a team of strangers that are all speaking different languages, that are all specialized in some small part of the whole process. And starting with the studio, going to the publisher, I think we need to do a lot of talking and a lot of listening to be as transparent as possible and make sure that we are moving everything in the right direction. Thanks for listening. That's it. Who has questions? Question here, right in the middle.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for the talk. It was really nice. I have a few questions. First of all, how does the relationship between the publisher works with a solo developer and not a team of developers?
I can answer that question. I'll only be able to answer from the perspective of Dear Villagers because my two prior experiences were with Blizzard and CDPR, so they were self-publishing but also had huge teams. So we have a few projects that are solo or duo developers, and usually the way that I like to do that is to be more personable. We tend to have more conversations in Discord than like formalized, structured approach to the game. We tend to exist. We tend to talk, like have phone calls more often, just to touch base and make sure that everything's going okay on their side. Ultimately, when someone's a solo developer or even in a small, like two-person team, you can end up, and especially over the last 2 years, the last year and a half, it can be easy to just get stuck in one place without a lot of contact, and it's important to keep the conversation going and to just talk as much as possible to ensure that each group is staying up to date on what's happening on each side of the project.
Okay, and as for my second question, it's pretty much about well, you talked a lot about the good things or the things that must be said during that exchange between the producer and the developers. But as a producer, what are really the big red flags or the big no-nos that you can find when you hear a pitch from a team? And if you've had any bad experiences with teams due to those red flags?
I'm going to make sure to write down your questions. Just don't mind me while I look to the side for just a moment here. So, to me, the biggest red flag, from the questions that I was asking before, from the stuff that I was saying that I'd like to see more of, a lot of that stuff are my flags. If somebody comes to me and says that they're making a game but that they don't have a process or that they're not following any kind of structure to their development, a team of 5 or 10 or 30 people who are all just kind of doing what they feel like when they feel like it, and that there's no regular meetings, that there's no tracking of what work's being done by who, those are the things that give me concern. For me, I'm adaptable. I don't care what process you use. Just come with something. Come with, and you don't have to invent something new. Just pick a thing. There's dozens, if not hundreds, of project management philosophies and methodologies that exist in the world. Just pick one and try it for a month. And if it works for you, keep using it. And if it doesn't, try another one. But for me, it's a pretty big red flag if I'm talking to a team about work that's going to take 2 years to do, and that there's no structure to the way that they're doing their work. As for the work that I've done and if that's caused problems, I'll say that every team that I'm working with has their own unique challenges. There is no perfect relationship. That's true in business as well as in life. So ultimately, it's part of my job to adapt to the situations that I find and do my best to find, if not compromises, then a way to collaborate to reach something even better. Thanks for your questions. Who else? Anyone? I see a question just there. A last-minute question. You caught me just as I was about to say thank you, everybody, so.
Thank you. You have already responded to my question, but that's okay. For you, you talk later that when you must make a decision, sometimes the boss will choose for other team, sometimes the member of the team will all talk and choose together.
Yeah.
For you, what's the best solution? Or no?
I'm afraid I have to give a middle ground answer here. It's decision making is a complicated topic, and it varies based upon situation. I think that it's important to have someone who can speak confidently for everyone when there is time pressure. If you're trying to make a deal, you're on a call with 10 people, you need someone, like 10 different partners, and you're trying to get something done, and it's going to be huge, and your game's going to go all over the world. There needs to be someone who is the spokesperson and who can make that call. Because that's time sensitive. That's a situation where you can't say, thank you everybody, please hold for 15 minutes while me and the team go and talk about this. On the other hand, it is generally better when there's no time pressure to let as many people speak and as many people contribute as possible. That's my perspective. So ultimately, you're looking at something that comes down to the timeliness of the decision that you're trying to make, and the capability of the team to contribute to that conversation. Who else? I see a microphone in motion.
Thanks for sharing. So my question is, from your perspective, from publisher perspective, what do you value for a developer or studio, what's your favorite features that from a developer? Can you list several, let's say 3 valuable features from your perspective? Thank you.
3 features. You mean game features? Like features in game, or like team features?
The overall, it can be a game. Let's say what type of game you will be pursuing, or for the team, like what kind of team you think you like to cooperate together.
There was a presentation yesterday. I'm going to answer your question, but maybe indirectly. There was a presentation yesterday given by, I think, the founder of Fireplace Games, Anais. And a lot of the stuff that she was saying about the way that their team internally organized themselves before moving forward and before deciding to create their game and establish the baseline for really what their team and their brand was going to look like. A lot of the stuff that she said, I think, was stuff that I am looking for from a team perspective. Their approach to development, the way that they did iterative development to move their product in the direction that they wanted it to go. I think En Garde was the example that she was giving. The way that they organized internally their principles and used those principles to guide their decision making from that point on. I think those are really, for me, really important things to see. I value highly people and groups who follow internal principles, who can define their internal principles, explain their internal principles to others, and then their decisions are guided by those things. So I think that is super important to me. From a product perspective, zooming in a little bit on games themselves, Dear Villagers really looks for games that tell a story, that start and finish, and that have some arc that makes the player feel something. And I think that's important for me too. That I want to see games. I want to see more games that evoke emotions in the same way that a movie or a song does. And I can't think of a third one. Sorry. Can't think of a third one just now. I guess some sort of, the third piece might be, like as I was answering in the question before, yeah, I'm confident in this now. I've talked it through with myself and I'm confident. The third piece that I would answer is what I said before, that some organizing principle within the team, some structure to the way that the studio works. And again, I don't care what the structure is. I can adapt to pretty much anything. I just want to see that there is a plan and that there is a well thought out process that takes you from your idea to something that people will love. Is that it? More questions? Microphone man? Perfect.
Thank you. I was wondering if I need to present, let's say, a vertical slice to a publisher, how can it be, how polished should it be, or how buggy can it be for you to be still like valuable, like for you to be able to understand clearly what it is without asking the studio to do all the polishing part and spending a lot of time in the demos that might be changed a lot after that?
So ultimately, this is a question around if you're providing a prototype, are you talking about just the slide, just like the information you're providing, or are you talking like prototype and...
Prototype. Let's say a prototype.
Okay, so ultimately that's a question around how close to a vertical slice do you need to be? How far down the path do you need to get? You know, I'm afraid I'm going to refer back to the Fireplace Games presentation. If none of you saw it, because the room was packed, it was completely full and people were being turned away. So if you can, go watch it in the videos afterwards. But if you didn't see it yesterday, but she also talked about the process that she follows there as well, and it really resonated with what I like to see. Ultimately, the presentation there was that think about your game. Think about the core concepts and mechanics of your game and make sure that feels good. The visuals for me don't matter as much, but I need to be able to play your game and be hooked. And normally that comes down to 3 C's. Normally that comes down to getting me at that level and keeping me engaged. So I personally understand that at the start of a project, you might just, and when you're seeking funding, you might just be 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 or 4 people trying to get your project out the door, and you don't have an artist in that group. Fine, take the strengths of the team that you have and make the best prototype that you can with that team. If it's a bunch of like rectangles or cubes moving around on the screen, but I feel good while moving those rectangles and cubes around on the screen. That's all that matters. Obviously, with all of that said, obviously more polished products will grab attention faster. However, for me, the pitch, the prototype and the pitch are all the same thing. It's all you sharing the language of your game with me. And so how accessible that language is, how easy it is for me to understand it, that's the part that matters to me, not how good it looks. Unless how good it looks is part of the language, in which case that's important.
Fantastic, thank you.
There's a hand up there, waving frantically.
Hi. What would you say is the best way to approach you with the pitch? And is there ways you should never approach you with the pitch? Like, this is a really bad way to present you my pitch.
Are you saying me personally?
Yeah.
Me personally, my cards are down at the bottom of the stairs here. Just grab one and send me an email. That's the best way. If it's not me, I get you tied into the right people, and we'll take a look and give feedback and start talking. That's the best way. Just reach out. I know on the Dear Villagers website there's a button that you can press and fill out the information to submit a pitch there. That's another great way to go. I think on the flip side, what not to do is coming unprepared, coming with bits and pieces. For me, ideally, what you're delivering is a package. Ideally, what you're delivering is a package with layers. So a brief that I can look at, like a one-page brief, and then a 5-minute video that I can look at, and then underneath that, a deck with more detail and a playable prototype or a playable vertical slice of some sort. Coming with little bits and pieces, saying like, here's a video. Do you want to know more? That takes my time to say, yes, I would like to know more. And then if you say, okay, here's my deck. Do you want the demo? That could get to be a little bit annoying, I think. But coming prepared, I think, is the right answer. If you and when I say coming prepared, that also means coming with the expectation that I will have questions. Coming with the expectation that I will potentially challenge what you're putting forward and have fundamental questions about what makes your game unique or special, and being emotionally ready to have somebody say like, oh well, yeah, I've seen that before. No, I don't want a phone call right now. Okay, is that a good answer? You good? Cool. Anybody else? I don't think so. Okay. Let me just quickly say, my friend Silen did all the art. He's a 2D artist, does great work. So if you liked the sheep and all the stuff, he made that in one day. I found it fantastic working with him. He iterated whenever I needed to and made all the art in this thing. I also want to thank my team, everybody who's here, Hermine, Mika, Jimmy, Erwan, Guillaume, and Francis. They all helped me with putting this presentation together. So make sure to give them a big round of applause right now as well. Thank you.